Good evening to everyone who's joining us. I'm glad to see lots of smiling faces. I'm seeing the same choir. I have to say, those of you who are not coming to choir practice need to be thinking about coming. I'm really beginning to be concerned. I have still a number of people that I have not seen task 2. So just as a reminder, I would say if you have not turned in task 2, you need to be really trying to get that turned in. And I'm assuming if you haven't turned in task 2, task 3, you're doing lots of research on strategies, and you're going to be able to pop that out pretty soon after finishing up with task 2. I know if you are in a hurricane situation, you have no choice but to be late, and it's fine. I just, the number of people I have that are not turning in exceeds the number of people that I think have weather-related major situations. So try to get them turned in. Okay. There's a couple of things I want to say before we open it up for questions. I want to make sure that everybody understands when you put something in my Blackboard space, it should have been through peer review, and you should have gone through it again based on the peer reviews. Should have been to Dr. Todd, should have been edited based on her suggestions. And it most certainly should be based on the rubric that hopefully everyone has read so many times that their eyes are beginning to cross when they look at it one more time. So when I'm getting papers and they're all sort of scrambled up, I'm wondering what's happening. So I just want to say that when you turn that paper into my Blackboard space, I will edit it and make comments one time, and I'll be returning it to you with the understanding that you are going to decide what to do about the comments that were made. And at this point, for this particular APSL, I don't think there's going to be any need for me to see that paper again. Because, you know, once you've had comments from your peers, from Dr. Todd and from me, it seems like to me that should start to get confusing if you just keep resubmitting. I have some papers that have shown up a couple of times. Well, I won't say a couple, 3 or 4 times, and that's not the process. The process is you get the feedback and you edit the paper, and unless I say specifically resubmit this paper, I'm not expecting it to to come back to the Blackboard space. Just edit and put it aside and move on to the next thing, because we want to make sure we have time for the APTEL, because there's some research stuff going on with that you need time to do. So you don't want to go into that process late. Dr. Lamb gave a really good discussion about Taskstream, and I want to make sure that you remember he said go into Taskstream and make sure that it opens for you. And if it does not open for you, you need to call or get in touch with Seth Oprah. And Seth is the man with the plan for Taskstream. He can fix it. But if you wait until you are supposed to be putting things in your Competency Folio and you're at the last minute and you go in there or try to go in there and you find it won't set up, you're going to be in bad shape, because we'll be moving on in the semester and Seth has lots of irons in his fire. And at the beginning of the semester, that's when he makes sure everybody is okay with Taskstream. and you may be on a waiting list if you don't get in touch with him now. So I'm just asking you, I'm almost begging you, please go into Taskstream and just, it'll be good for you to just go set it up and look around and see what it's like. Because once you see what it's like, you won't be so intimidated by it, and you won't be so stressed. So it's really in your best interest in a lot of ways for you to just go ahead and go into Taskstream, see what it looks like, punch a few buttons, see what it says, and become familiar with that. Okay. Has anybody, I've seen a couple of people have gone in and done their dispositions. Dispositions you can go ahead and do now, because what you're doing is saying where you are in those dispositions. It's just a self-evaluation. We assume that everybody isn't perfect yet, and it's okay if you need improvement, because if I were taking that assessment, there would be some things I would probably mark needs improvement, because sometimes as we get old, we regress. And so we just have to keep telling ourselves we have to keep working so we don't get all frozen up with our arthritis and all that, and brains too. So be honest with yourself. You'll be doing that 3 times during the semester, and hopefully you'll feel better and better as time goes by. So that's all I'm going to say about Taskstream, except get on it and make sure it works for you. Okay. The only other announcement is I know that right now we will not have office hours on 10/14. That's not this week. That's the following week. 10/14, I will not be holding office hours because I have a conference I need to be at. So 10/14, no office hours. So I guess if somebody comes to office hours on that day, I will be sorry. But that will tell me they either didn't come to this meeting or they didn't watch the video. So anyway, I'm making that announcement today. Okay. So let's say we have people who haven't turned in 2 yet. Some maybe reworking 2, and that's fine. Are there any questions about 2? We're just not going to dwell on 2 because we pretty much should be pretty much done with it. Okay. Yes. So we're looking. 2 is done and down and dirty, right? Okay. So let's talk about 3. Who has a question about 3? Anybody? Okay, everybody is okay. Ms. Burris, I don't see you. I see a picture, but I don't see you. There you are. You're always hiding out. She's hiding out there. There she is. Okay. Let's see. No questions about 3. Okay, so I should be seeing 3s coming soon. I haven't started evaluating 3s because I'm still trying to get everybody with 2s across the board. And I think I have about 3 or 4 in queue and 3 or so that I haven't received. So we'll have to see about that. Okay, so I'm going to turn the page because we were talking about 3. And did you get your question answered, Ms. Powell? Wasn't it you that we were?
I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm eating and watching.
Oh, you are fine. Did you have any more question?
No, I think, like I said, I think I have most of what I needed. I think I need to reformat it. I think I need to pull out the annotated bibliography pieces and put them on their own page, like you said, and attach it in the appendices.
Oh yeah. Do not put that annotated bibliography. If I'm I try not to skim through the paper and look at it first. I really try to read it like the evaluator is going to read it, because they're going to read it cold turkey. And
Right.
if I skim through it, then I can see where you're headed. So I try to read it in the evaluator's seat. So if it's not making sense because you haven't told me things or they're not in the right order, I can sort of pick up on that easier. So if I were looking at the paper and I saw the annotated bibliography in the paper, I probably would send it back.
Right.
And just say, you need to take this out and look at the paper again. Okay, so in 4, now I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I'm going to ask what kind of questions you have about 4 before maybe I don't even need to do my spiel, because I listened to your discussion with Dr. Todd, and it sounded like people were pretty on go with it.
Please do your spiel.
What now?
I do have one
I
question.
said, please do your spiel.
Do my spiel.
Yes.
Okay. Question though. What question do you have?
In the templates that we were provided, it says to either do a graphic organizer or a PEP chart.
Or a PERT chart.
PERT chart, yeah, thank you. I couldn't remember what it's called.
And there's an example there.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Okay. So
you have a chart. You can do either one.
Okay. So I was going to just do it in the same format as my school improvement plan, because it's going to be actually part of the school improvement.
Well, I think that's what we suggested.
Okay. So that's okay that I continue to do that.
That is what we suggested.
Yeah, but you had made a comment about that you had seen some school improvement charts that weren't that good.
Well, I've seen.
We're going to provide us with a template, and I just wanted to make sure that that we could still use ours, or do you need to approve it first?
I would say that as long as the plan, whatever the plan is that your school uses, should be the plan that you try to use. Now, in order to meet the requirement of all the things that it says you need to provide, you may have to add something, but I can't really imagine that you'd have to add much, because the way most people seem to be able to do it, that requires the least reworking in the end, is to put the title at the top, like this is the stakeholder involvement plan, or this is the student learning plan, this is what we're working on, this is the part of your plan. Because for you're going to have a section on student learning. That's the piece you're doing now. Then you're going to have a piece on teacher empowerment and leadership. Then you're going to have a piece on community involvement. Then you're going to have a piece on culture. And then we're going to, you just tick through these, and the other one is organizational management, which basically is your scheduling, the legal beagle ideas of scheduling. What do the legalities say about scheduling? And then the 6th project is taking all of those and putting them into a school improvement plan. So that's why I say you need to try to use the plan format that you use in your school. Because if any of this ends up in your school improvement plan, which we hope it will, it'll be just right ready for you to cut and paste, instead of completely putting it into a new format just to please your principal. Okay, so just use that format. But think about your format and make sure that on your format, there's a place to put the activities. Well, what school improvement plan doesn't have a place for you to put the activities? Of course, you have a column for the activities. And while we're talking, if you'll just take your pencil and just draw out a little chart, make sure you have the activity, a timeline. When is it going to happen? And how often is it going to happen? It depends on what you're talking about as to whether you say a specific time or whether it's going to be once a week, once a month, twice a year. You know, what is the timeline for this specific activity that you've chosen to do? Then who is going to be responsible? Not teachers. Don't just put teachers. What teachers? Lead teachers? All teachers? Gifted teachers? What teachers? You know, administration? No, not administration. Assistant principal for instruction? Assistant principal for discipline? Principal? Instructional facilitator? Who is it that's going to be doing what you said? The person responsible. Be specific. Okay. What resources? And you have a couple of types of resources. And for this particular project, you probably wouldn't break it down as fiscal resources and human resources. But for some of your projects, you're going to have to do that. So just sort of realize that when you put a column for resources, you may want to subdivide that into fiscal and human resources. Okay, because somewhere down the track, if you take my word for it, you're going to have those two columns required. Okay. Now, if you do just a resources column, that is fine if that's the way your plan is, but under that, you're going to have to put human and put what it is, and fiscal and put what that would be. So it's got to be in the plan. At some point, it's going to be required for some of the things you have on your plan. So you need to accommodate the fact that you're going to have to do that at some point in time. Okay.
Dr. Tillman, would resources be, I know you said fiscal, which implies money, but the ones that we've chosen are free. Like, you know, the online.
So what would you put?
I'm sorry?
So what would you put?
I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out where the.
Would you say free?
So you just put, okay.
Yeah, if there's no cost, then you put no cost. Yeah.
Okay, and so if it were Chromebooks, we could put, we know that the students need Chromebooks in order to do these activities. If we already have them, then we'll put Chromebooks, but we'll say under the fiscal, we already have these.
You won't really put, we already have these, you just put 0, because when you put the chart, you're trying to use as few words as possible because you're using a chart.
Okay.
Where what you're saying will go is in the narrative that's before the chart.
Okay.
Where you talk about all the resources that are needed for the activities that you are citing.
Okay.
Okay. So you'll have it in there, but you'll discuss it more in the narrative. So that's a good point, because when you write the narrative, some people think, oh, well, I'll just cut and paste the narrative into the chart. And suddenly the chart becomes 10 pages long because all that stuff that you're trying to put in the columns. When you're doing a chart, the smaller the number of words, the easier it is to interpret. And when you're handing this to a new teacher who just walked into your building and you're trying to explain what they're supposed to be doing, it's much easier to have just a few words there that give you a hint, and then you can flesh it out later. So going beyond the resources, then what about assessment? Well, you need formative assessment and you need summative assessment. And for many of your projects, the summative assessment is going to be either that improved school performance grade, because that's, some of you have set that as this is the big deal. But you also want to be talking about what raising the individual scores. Like if you're talking about science, then you're going to be setting some summative assessments. It would be the science end of course. If you're talking about reading, and you're talking about inferential text, then that would be something that you would be looking to improve. So you've got to have your formative and summative. Now, some of these projects require short-term, midterm, and long-term goals. So when you do the formative, you're going to have short-term and midterm. And then the summative, of course, would be the final. And of course, when you're talking about continuous improvement, there is no final, right? Because that summative evaluation then becomes the input that you start with to start the process all over again, where you look at the data and say, okay, we've improved to here. What can we do? Where are the weaknesses now? And so it's just that constant looking at the data, finding the weak spots, doing the research to figure out what to do about the weak spots, implementing the strategies that you select, and evaluating and going through that process again. Continuous improvement is what we're all about. Okay, so then goals. Well, of course, the final goal is what you said was the weakness. You want to make sure that, think about your vision. What was your vision? And what was the purpose? So think about those things when you're setting your final goals. And the indicators of success can be benchmarks along the way. You could use that as maybe some students use that as their midterm. They use their benchmarks because some schools do benchmarks, every 6 weeks, every 4 weeks. Some people don't use benchmarks. So I can't say to you, use your benchmarks as this particular assessment piece, because each of your schools is in a different place. So you have to look at what you have and decide how it fits with what you're doing and how what you're doing fits into the bigger picture of the system of your school. Okay, so with all of that said, what kind of questions does that bring to mind as you talk about putting it into the table, into a table?
I have a question that's not about.
Okay, now is it that I didn't make it clear, or is it that you have no questions?
No, I actually.
Oh, I can't hear.
You can't hear me?
No.
No.
And I've got my sound way up too.
Okay.
Okay, that's,
So you can't hear me now?
well, I can just a little bit.
Okay, well, I'll talk really loud. I'll try to.
Holler at me. Go ahead, Miss Eckhart.
No, I guess one clarification I was wanting is in the beginning of prompt 1, it talks about the importance of the action plan being research-based. So my question was whether or not the information I put relative to that is about the importance of the action plan at my school, or research that supports an action plan.
That's it. The research that supports the fact that you're putting all of this energy into creating an action plan.
Okay.
It's like the research that is behind you using a PLC. You know, there would be no reason, we could just call it a committee. You know, we could just call it a bunch of teachers getting together because they're interested in something. But we call it a PLC because there's research that says if you structure it like this and you do these things, it's more likely to be successful. So that's the way this is. In order to move a school forward, you know, it's like turning around a battleship. It takes a long time to do it. And I was glad that Dr. Todd pointed that out. You can't do a lot at one time or nothing will get done. You have to really turn that battleship around slowly and get it going in the right direction. And then you can do some speeding up a little bit maybe after you get everybody on the same page, but you got to get everybody together. And that takes patience, and it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of focus on staff development, and it takes a lot of believing in folks that they are going to do the right thing if you equip them with the right tools. And I personally believe there are very few teachers out there that won't do an excellent job if they have the tools to do it. And what we have to do is encourage them to have enough confidence in us to say, I don't know how to do that. I've tried it in my class and it falls apart. Can I go visit somebody's class and observe it? Can I go to a workshop about it? We need to develop these relationships with people so they have confidence that we really want to help them and they want to help students. So, yeah. Did that help with, okay, so it's why does the action plan, why is it that format? And we don't, the PERT charts, and I was going to look that up before tonight and make sure I remember, it's a performance kind of thing, and it's a business chart. If a business was trying to move forward in a new direction, they would more likely have a PERT chart because it pulls all their pieces together. But in education, it's easier for us if we use something more that's in a table format, or I found that to be true simply because you're used to that in the school improvement plans that you have at your school. Okay, so task 4, what other, I'm looking at task 4 over here, and it says under prompt 1 that you have to have an electronic narrative presentation. And why do you have to have that narrative presentation? What's going to happen to it at the end?
That's the presentation to your administration, correct?
You've got to be able to present it to your administration. That's exactly right. So when you present it to the administration, you want to remind them about what you're focusing on, and make sure you bring them up to date. And you will literally show them the data and show them the strategies that your team selected and show them pieces of your plan little by little. Don't put that whole thing on one slide and expect people to be able to read it. That's not what you're after. But present the information, and so that's where you're headed with that. When it says up there, an electronic narrated presentation that must include but not be limited to the importance of an action plan. So you're going to have a slide that shows something about the importance. Now that's not a whole lot of print, right? That's just maybe a quote, maybe a couple of quotes. Then it says in alignment with their student learning outcomes. And so you've got a lot of data that says the student learning outcomes aren't what you want them to be. So, just decide what you want to use there. Show them some short, mid, and long-term goals. What did your team decide? The special activities. See, here's that list of things that's going to be in your plan. Indicators of success with measurement techniques. Not just we're going to get better. How much are you going to get better? How are you going to measure it? How do you know when you get there? Now, if you have 39% of your kids doing something, you want to set realistic goals. How much do you think you can improve? Maybe set some short and long-term goals. Maybe you're going to set some of those goals based on benchmarks instead of end-of-course testing. But it's interesting. We have some people doing some very interesting projects where they're beginning to question the promotion policies of their district, because they can show that the people that don't pass the end of grade and go to summer school and take whatever substitute test they're allowed to take at summer school and pass and be promoted, or if they're allowed to take the EOG again, and they fail it still and are still promoted, they don't catch up. It just gets worse. And you people are at the high school, you shouldn't wash your hands of it and say it has nothing to do with me. Those elementary teachers just need to get with it. No, you need to realize those kids are coming right on up to you. And I see some statistics like the people entering schools with 27, 37, 51% proficiency. You're not going to have a 95% graduation rate when the kids walking through the door have less than 50% proficiency at whatever they were doing when they walked through the door. So we're all in this together. So we just need to set realistic goals, and we need to try to be part of doing what's in the best interest of kids. And I will say, I have no data to stand behind this, but I would say that one of the things in the last few years since the big recession has been money. Because whatever you spend per year on a child's education in your state, if you retain a child, you're adding that figure to the budget. Somebody's got to pay for that extra year of teaching, and it just snowballs. So the more kids you retain, the more money's got to be in the budget. And the middle school principal doesn't want those kids left in his school, because that means he's not going to be able to buy whatever it is his teachers want him to or her to buy, because he's going to have another teacher to teach all those kids they retained. So let's get them through the door seems to be the word, right? Yeah. Send them on. When they get to the high school, the high school will fix it. And sometimes that it just doesn't work. So there's some good research going on there. So indicators of success, make sure that you're really looking to be realistic. So when you get there, you can set new goals next year, but you want to be able to celebrate getting to some of those goals. Okay, and it says classification of roles. That just means who's doing what. And don't put everything on the media specialist. I have some people that just think the media specialist must not be doing much because she looks like she's in charge of a whole bunch of stuff. and the assessment criteria. So now, what about the written part of the paper? How does the written part look? What do you think the narrative should look like? Did I hear somebody?
It should include the headings there under prompt 1. The importance of the action plan.
Yes, and that's where you'll start, the importance of the action plan. And if you're talking about, it says that you demonstrate a knowledge and understanding related to systematic investigation of needs and solutions. What does that sound like you're going to do? Think about what you've done so far in this project, and it says you're going to demonstrate knowledge and understanding related to systematic investigation of needs. When did you do that?
With the needs assessment?
And number 2, the needs assessment. And solutions are essential. When did you do solutions?
Task 3.
Yeah.
Task 3, when you sought out strategies to address what you identified in your needs assessment. Good job. Okay. So, as demonstrated through the application of the assigned technologies, and remember, some of those strategies were supposed to be technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Make sure you have that in there. And you're working with your PLC to develop a complete action plan as outlined and articulated to the school leadership team. And so the things that you have to have are actually listed over there under where it says prompts. Okay, so you want to make sure that everything that you talk about those. And so as you go through, that's one of the reasons I don't want you to come up with 10 different things that you're going to do. Because when you talk about alignment with the student learning outcomes, if you have 5 different strategies you're going to use, that means you've got to talk about 5 different things that you're going to tie to student learning objectives. And then when it goes down to short, mid, and long-term goals, you're going to have short, mid, and long-term goals for those 5 different things. So you're going to be talking about that. It's going to be a narrative form. Don't think table format. We're talking about the narrative before you show the table. Okay? So for each of those pieces, each of those headings, think about headings on that table. For each of those headings, you've got to address that for each of the strategies that you say you want to implement. So I'm saying I would keep it down to maybe 2, maybe 3. That's why I say they should be broad strategies.
Okay.
Okay. Does that make sense?
So this action plan is really, this paper here is about the 2 strategies that we're saying that we're focusing on.
Yes, because in 3, you researched all these strategies. And saying, okay,
right,
I'm going to do these. But in 4 is where you actually develop the action plan.
For the 2, okay.
Okay, in 4, and task 4, the whole idea there is the action plan. But I'm just wanting to make sure that you don't think all you have to do is do a chart.
Okay.
The chart is not, the chart is what you're going to actually end up with. But you're going to talk through that chart step by step by step, just like when you were doing the data. You did a narration about the table and then you showed the table. Well, this You're doing a narration about each column on that plan, and then you're showing the plan.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it's really important that you get your head sort of wrapped around the fact that you have to do the narration about those things that are listed there under the prompt heading on the rubric. And notice at the bottom it says prompt 2. And when you get to prompt 2, that has to be in the narrative. That is narrative. The candidate will meet with the administrative team, and the discussion should include the following topics. So now you're going to present the action plan, but you're supposed to also be talking about these broad areas. Does that say you need to have a paragraph about building efficacy with your staff in order to make this action plan be successful? Okay. Strategies for growth. Talk about how you're going to ways that you can make this growth happen. Diversity. How is diversity working into this picture? Your resources. Establishing a shared vision. Remember, you have a vision in your task 1 that you said this was the PLC's vision. Don't lose your vision. We're trying to get the vision out there. We're trying to get people to buy into the vision. The vision might be a school with a 95% graduation rate. That's really a graduation rate, not that we've siphoned off all of the non-performing students to some alternative school where their graduation rate is 35%, but then everybody else's high school graduation rate is 95 or 98%. You know, we don't want to get into that business. And some districts are in that business and they've been in it for a long time. I did my dissertation on implementing the vision of the effective high school principal, and I found one of those blue ribbon schools that got national recognition. That's exactly how they had such great scores. Is their district had a specialty school, and if you had so many discipline demerits, you went to that school and you couldn't get back to the main school unless some teacher advocated for you. And that probably didn't happen very often. But they had great SAT scores, had great ACT scores, had a great graduation rate, but it wasn't a very good picture when you got scratching the surface. So anyway, so you want to make sure that all of that is in your paper. Questions?
That prompt 2 that you were just talking about with the headings, building efficacy and all that, I know we have the meeting with the PLC for prompt 1 of task 4. And then we do the meeting with the administration. That's when we do the prompt 2.
Okay, I would think that as you're going through and talking about the headings from that list that they give you, the alignment of student learning objectives,
yes,
that would be a heading, and you would talk about that. How does this strategy align with your student learning objectives?
Okay.
And then,
right.
Your short and long-term goals. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have more headings here than you have in other sections.
Right.
And when you get to prompt 2, you might, I've had people do it both ways. I've had people use those as headings, but you might just do it as a discussion of how this action plan can bring about those things. But make sure you talk about them and that the evaluator can pull out that you're talking about them.
Okay.
Even if it's a short paragraph where you use those words in the introductory sentence of the paragraph.
Okay.
Think about good writing strategies. Tell them what you tell them, tell them, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them in the summary, right?
Okay.
I used to tell my kids that all the time. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. And by that time, they probably have a paragraph written. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. What else we got going on?
Dr. Tillman, when you were talking about the candidate demonstrates the knowledge and understanding related to systematic investigation of needs and solutions, and we were talking about that was, task 1 and task 2 and when we were talking about that. So do we recap all of our tasks in task 4?
You don't need to do a whole lot of recap, but what you're doing is just sort of bringing them up to date. And I think somebody asked Dr. Todd if they needed to keep doing these. I'm always saying, tell them what's going to be coming next. And then when you do the next, I say, make sure you tell them what just happened. And I think maybe some people don't particularly care to do that because it's not right there. This particular one does put it in there because as you're talking about the action plan, you really are needing to demonstrate that you have the knowledge of developing an action plan, and by recapping, you're actually telling how the action plan was developed. It's not a matter of going back and citing more research and doing all that. It's just saying that in order to develop this plan, we analyze the data. We determine.
You're just kind of recapping what you've done to this point and how it got you to where you are now.
Right. That's
okay.
it. Just
okay.
so that they can see that you have an understanding of the process. This whole program is built on continuous improvement, the process, and how you go about it. And it's very cyclical. You look at it and you think, oh, how boring. But boy, when you start trying to do it, it is turning that battleship around. It is hard to do. It is really hard to do. Yeah. But you can do it. You can do it. Yeah. Other good questions? Anything else? Okay, now Dr. Todd went over task 5. I've done this several ways. Seems like every time I deal with task 5 or task 4, depending on which task it is in the particular project, I tried doing it different ways. And I've just pretty much decided that task 5, you can turn it into my Blackboard. All I'm going to do is skim through it and make sure it looks like you've got something in there that could go in your competency folio. Because when you write up the competency folio, I'm really reading the most to you, what was the most important thing you did in that particular competency. So you may talk about communication with your peers, you may talk about communication with your professors, you may talk about communication class projects you did, about some of the case studies you did. There's just a lot of things you can talk about communication that you might put in her paper, but you don't have to put any evidence in her paper. So when you go to the competency folio, you're going to select something that you feel is the best example that demonstrates your ability to communicate. And you're going to talk about that. And I think somebody said last time that they found what I had sent them. So I'm thinking you have that example that I sent you that has a chart, and on the second page of that chart, it gives you a format. And after several semesters of trying different formats, I finally settled on this one, and I think it's the easiest for students. And I know it's easier for their evaluator. And it requires that you put, for example, for this, you'll put APSL in caps, underlined, and then the next line, you will actually tell exactly how you demonstrated, what example you're giving. And remember that you have to do a digital competency with that. So you're going to say in this, and I wrote it on there, an example. You don't have to use this wording, but it needs to say something like, the work done demonstrates this competency, also demonstrates digital competency through the use of, and you name the tool, the digital tool that you used in creating, and you tell what you created. And then add anything else about the digital information that's related to what you made, and make a statement as to your level of proficiency with that digital tool. And what you've done is you have, when you said digital competency, you have underlined and bold digital competency. So when the evaluator is reading your paper, your competency folio, they're going to tick down through there, and they're going to see your example, and they're going to see that you did a digital. They're going to look down, and they're going to see the product that you talked about in the paper. Okay. Now,
Repeat that statement. The work done demonstrates.
well, you've got it right there on the bottom of that piece of that.
Oh.
This form that I gave you, I sent you.
Okay. Okay.
On the bottom of that form, on the second page of that form, it gives it to you, and you don't have to use that exact. Just tell them what digital competency you demonstrated. And there only has to be one digital competency for each of the competencies. You can do more than one. If you have a good PowerPoint and then you did a great video, you can do that. But you have to have one. So as they look at your folio, they're going to look at the three examples, the three submissions that you have to do for each competency, and they're looking for the digital one among them. And I'm just saying, don't make them look for it. Say digital competency and underline it, bold it, so they can go right to it and see that it in fact is a digital competency, and what you attached as your evidence is digital, and it uses the tool that you said it used. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last thing I'm asking you to do is make sure that when you finish, draw a line so that the next time you come back to that competency, you are going to start new. If it's maybe it's the APSL, the APTL. And so you'll put APTL underlined, and you'll put what you did for the APTL. And if there's a digital competency, you'll mark that. And for each of these competencies, you're supposed to attach documentation that what you said you did, you actually did. That does not mean that you go in and you say, oh, okay, when I was doing task 1, I was a great communicator, and slap task 1 in there as your as your example, that is not documenting communication. What you want to do to document the communication is something that shows you communicating. It might be that you held your meeting and you have a video of the meeting. It might be a the Prezi presentation thing. It might be a PowerPoint. It might be your peer review link in Zoom. But it's a thing. It is not a written 5 or 6 pages where you expect the evaluator to wade through it and see if they can find where you did some communicating that you've talked about in your paper.
If it doesn't come from one of the projects, do you type in open-ended and underline it and put that, or do you put actually what it was?
The open-ended is if it says, for example, when I was talking last night to, I wrote that down. For example, Dr. Todd said she wanted you to do judgment, for example. Judgment says that you need to have one entry for the skip and one entry for the SIAP and one entry for open-ended. Well, you're not doing the skip and you're not doing the SIAP. So she's asking you to do a judgment one. So you're going to do that as open-ended. And instead of APSL, you'll put open-ended and underline that because that's the requirement that you're meeting. So in the end, for judgment, you'll see open-ended, and then you'll have the requirement and the documentation attached, a line, and then you'll see SIAP, and you'll see the paragraphs and the documentation and a line, and then you'll see the skip with the underlined and the documentation after the narrative, and that'll be the 3 submissions for judgment. Does that make sense? Okay, and you're going to run into that. Next semester, your professor may say they want you to do judgment. Well, you can add a 4th to your little competency folio. And some people, well, I guess I'll just say this. Some people do this folio to just get it done. You know, I've got to have 3 things. Okay, here's one, here's one, here's one. What can I attach? I'll attach that. You type it in. You don't proofread it. It has 3 or 4 misspelled words. It has, you know, there's a noun-verb agreement. The data is made as a singular instead of a plural word. But you really don't care because you're done. Well, you're not going to use that competency folio ever again because you're just doing it to get it done. And then there are other people that see the value of this because when you finish, you're going to be able to take this document with you and you can attach it to your digital resume. And it can, the people that receive it can look at it and see, my gosh, look at the work. They can see that you can write the King's English. They can see that you can organize because look, this thing follows the same format all the way through. I can click on this and go to a YouTube that shows what they've been doing. Look, there's a PowerPoint right here. Oh my goodness, look at this. It speaks for your professional self. And so I just would really hope that you would do the latter and that you would start out with the very first entry and go, I'm going to try to do this so that I give the best possible presentation of professional self possible. Because when you end up, you're going to have 63 pieces of work that you have done. And when you get ready to go into a job interview, one of the things they're going to ask you for sure is, what are your strengths? And when you get in there and they ask you that and you tell them, they're going to say, can you give us some examples? Boy, if you can think back what you put in that portfolio, you've got great examples. You can talk about it until they ask the next question. What about the other question they always ask? What is it that needs to be on your professional development plan? Or what are your weaknesses, honey? Don't tell them you don't have any. That's really not a good answer. But you can think back about your portfolio and think about some of the hardest things you had to do. And you can say, well, when I was developing my portfolio, I realized that I really need to work on, and you give some examples of what you did and maybe ways you wish you could have done better, or that you decided, gosh, I was having trouble with that, and I had the opportunity to take a professional development course, and I took that, and I feel much better about that. And you can talk about your competence, not about the pie in the sky. You know, I just hate it when people, you ask them, about education, and all they want to say is all children can learn and it's my responsibility to teach them. Well, those are two really correct statements, but how are you going to do that? What skills do you have? Tell me about what you can do. And when you start interviewing teachers, you want them to tell you what they can do, because then when you go to observe them, you want to see it. And you can expect to see it because they told you they could do it. But this portfolio is really a great tool for you, because it's something you can, by the time you've typed this in and you take it with you, you can, print out the stuff, and you've got a study guide right there for your interviews. And I think it's worth doing well. So anyway.
And all of this, Dr. Tillman, all of this is posted in Taskstream, and you go ahead and post it under Final Competency Folio?
No. He gave you directions. I believe he said that to set up, remember he took you through the steps of setting up your portfolio. You have to set it up under pages, web pages and folios.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I remember that now.
Over the top, you click on that and you just step through it. And if you forgot the steps, he has a little video that I think he put it in all the shells. So you can pull it off the shell. It's about 2 minutes. It's just a click, click, click. Basically you get to choose the style. And sometimes you choose those colors thinking you like them. You may want to change it because sometimes they're not nearly as nice as you think they're going to be. So choose one you like and set it up. Because if you go ahead and go in there and set it up, you can see what I'm talking about as far as here are the 3 things that you have to do. And it's just as clear as it can be. It says, here is the competency. Here are the 2 things you must give us a submission from, and then an open-ended. And it gives you the definition, so you can read that definition before you start writing. So you make sure you tell them as close to what they're asking for as you can based on what you did. Talking about things you could attach, one thing, a written thing that you could attach is like the case studies that you do. You can actually attach a case study. That would be okay to attach something like that. But don't attach a whole task, or don't, if you're talking about taking personal responsibility for something, and that one about personal responsibility for performance, and you decide that this action plan is really something that you can pull the action plan out, but don't put the whole task 4. That's what we're saying. It needs to be something they can look at, something that you have done that they can look at. And so as a result, you wouldn't put charts and graphs that you pull from the internet, for example. That shows you have digital competence, that you can go out and pull things off the internet, but that is not the level of skill you want to demonstrate you have. Okay? You're trying to demonstrate the absolute best competence that you have. Okay, other questions? Good questions. Are you
I have a question.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's not about any of the app sale, but will we have to get back in with our PLCs after this app sale?
You're going to need a PLC. Yeah.
The same one?
Usually, but you can make it different. It depends on the student and what you're going to do. What you're going to be doing next with the app tool is going to be working with teacher empowerment and leadership. And if you have your book there, I'll be glad to just sort of leaf you through that. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. But if you want to look at the rubric, if I can get my fingers to work here, when you get old fingers, because you're going to be doing best practices, and you're going to be doing another literature review, but it's going to be on teacher empowerment and leadership. And you're going to be looking at data, but it's going to be different kinds of data. And a lot of this you are going to be doing. So it's not going to be as important here. But when you get to, climate and culture, communication, like in the communication piece, you're going to be doing some surveying. So you may want to have a PLC working with you on some of your future projects. But
it looks like in the task 3 of the AppTel, you have to have a group of teachers working with you.
Yeah, but not in every piece.
Right.
Like with this, you're doing the research piece for the PLC. So it could be a different group. It might be the same group. It depends on your situation. Okay, good question. Other questions? Are there any other questions about the folio? I think the competency folio, I think your concerns about it are mostly coming from the fact that you haven't seen it yet. So that's why I'm asking, go ahead and go into the folio and, get it set up and go in and look at it and see what's there. And you'll feel better about it, because it doesn't have to be long. It's more quality than quantity. You just want everything in there to shine.
And I had already set mine up. I had just completely forgotten what it looked like.
Okay, so just take it from Ms. Heatherly. You need to go in there and get it set up so you become familiar with it. And it's really easy looking, isn't it, Ms. Heatherly? Make them feel good.
No, it definitely is. And and I'll go back and watch Dr. Lamb's video. The only thing I couldn't remember was there was a separate thing for digital learning competencies. And I couldn't remember what he had said about that because we were.
No, when you listen to his video, he will say that you don't have to put anything in there because they are all linked
Right.
You're expected to do them within the other competencies.
Okay. I remembered him saying something about it. I just couldn't remember it exactly, so I was going to go back and watch it again.
Yeah. That's what you need to do, is make sure that the digital learning competencies are noted so that within each competency, when you see those 3 entries with a line between each one, you have 3 different competencies, and one of them has a really good digital learning competency. So that what's attached, what you've used as the documentation, is a product of that digital tool that you name. Okay? And I think once you get in there and you see it, it's going to be like, oh, this is a piece of cake. And it really is, because you've done all this hard work, and this is just a place to record it. It's just a place to show what you can do. And you can do a lot. Yeah. Okay. So we should be winding down, I think. Any other questions that you have? Okay, and I'm going to say, if you have not turned in 2, I need you to definitely plan to come to office hours, because I need to get 2 off the shelf so I can really get into 3. And 3 should not be difficult to evaluate. Either you've got the number, you've got the literature review done correctly, you've got the annotated bibliography attached, you've had a meeting, you've selected the strategies, and you've sort of done a little bit of graphic organizers to show why. Okay, so those should be easy to evaluate. 2, I think, is the hardest one to get filtered through. Okay, last call for questions. I am going to sign us out, and I appreciate you coming. And I did ask the other day, when you get with your group for your peer reviews, please encourage them to read, to listen to the videos, and to read their rubrics carefully and hold them accountable for that rubric. That's the best thing you can do for your group, is to really be tough. Just expect a lot, because it'll keep them from having to redo. And that's a blessing, to have a sister that will help you. And I say that because I don't see any brothers. I'm only in the sisterhood. And if we're not careful, the sisters are going to take over this world, and it's going to be a better place. Anyway, I'm going to sign us out. Good night, folks.